What's up, guys, and welcome to Straight from the Chest podcast. My name is Justin Groth, and I'm your host on this personal development, personal growth podcast. Listen, if you're new to this show, I just want to take this time and I want to welcome you, and I want to thank you for being here. And if this is your 50th or 300th time tuning back in, thank you for your continued listenership, support of the channel. It means a lot to me. And if you haven't yet, please subscribe to us on Spotify, Apple, SoundCloud, anywhere there's podcasts, we're likely there. And if you haven't yet subscribed to the YouTube, please do so as well. We just started that. Let's try to get that growing and get it at least to 1,000 subscribers. We're so low on that thing, but with your help, we can obviously get it to be something greater. So I appreciate you. Thank you for tuning in. Without any further ado, my guest, Valerie. What's up? How are you doing?
Hey, how are you?
Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Happy
to be here.
So, I have a lot of questions for you. And when you came in, I purposely didn't want to ask anything. I didn't want to get into the weeds of anything because I wanted to save that for obviously the podcast and have it come across as authentic and transparent and genuine for the listeners as I can. So, because apart from that, I'm a very inquisitive person. And I want to know a lot about people because I think people are fascinating and they have obviously awesome stories and things that can help others. So without any more lag, let's get into who you are. So I want to start off first with what got you into producing?
So that was just kind of an accident, really. I've been working in advertising for several years, and when I was working I ended up picking up a job at Charter Media and was just selling ads there. And so I was going on sets and I was, working with the team doing the video production side of it, and I just thought it was fascinating. And it really intrigued me. I'd worked in newspaper years before, and that's not as exciting, but I've always had an eye, I think, just for ads in general and what pops. And so when I had the opportunity to be on set and then start helping with writing commercials, and I feel like it just all came naturally for me. And I had already been in management for many years before then. So that director ability just, again, I felt like it kind of came naturally. And I found myself wanting to get more involved, but to some degree you have to kind of like be careful because I'm in sales and I'm not right on that team producing. So what ended up happening was I met a gentleman, and he had a company called Noble Productions, and I met him through Charter Media because they were placing what they referred to as long form, and long form is 30-minute shows that people buy on TV, right, on cable networks. And so they were producing content, and these were these Sky River RV shows where this guy's like telling you how great these RVs are, and his name's Michael Beardsley, and he's Remember that guy? Yeah. So super cool guy. And I was like, okay, I need to learn more about this. And of course I wanted them to buy from me and place these buys because it was big money, And then I went and met with them, found out more about it. They started placing more time and producing. And so Noble Productions, the producer at the time, would bring me this content, deliver it to Charter Media. We put it on the air and whatever. So as time went on and I got to know the owner of Noble Productions quite well, then I call him, he's like one of my angels that was a blessing to me along the way in my career. And I've had many, many, many of those. And we just connected as I do with a lot of my clients. And he said, Valerie, you're, a really smart person. You know your stuff. Like, what do you want in life? What do you? And I said, I would love one day to have an advertising agency. But at that point in time, the economy was crap. It was like back in, I think, 2008. And it was just not good. And he said, well, I want to do something more with Noble Productions, and I think you're the person that could do that. And I was kind of blown away. I was like, okay, so do I leave this, this job in corporate and everything's great and I'm getting benefits and like salary's good? And I had come from corporate already from Central Coast newspapers, from working there for 7 years and being an ad director. So I've been in management for so long, and then I took the sales position because I lost my job there with everything that happened with the economy. And so I just kind of sailed, you can say, and I just kind of like did a lot of partying, and I just kind of like let loose for those 2 years that I worked at Charter Media. And then this happens, and I'm approached to essentially start my own agency, and I'm being handed kind of this business that's not really formed. You know, all they were doing at the time was producing the content, and this is the only show that they had. And so behind the scenes, I actually started building Noble Productions, the brand, the name, the website, like everything from the ground up behind the scenes. I hired a salesperson behind the scenes, trained her. She was a good friend of mine, and I would teach her how to make sales calls. And then we started slowly building up with wine shows. And so I built Noble Productions essentially from the ground up and turned it into what it is today. And I accidentally ended up in front of the camera because my whole intent was to be the director behind the camera. And that didn't happen, because when you're broke and you have no means of paying hosts, then you hire whoever you can, you know. And so on this particular day, my 2 hosts didn't show up, and my salesperson and, you know, the person I'm working with in the business is freaking out. And I'm like driving to Paso because we've got, I think, 3 interviews to do with 2 wineries. And then I think Wine Wrangler at the time, they were giving tours over there. And she's like, what are we going to do? You know, our host didn't show up. And I'm like, what else can we do? I guess I'm going to have to get in front of the camera and do these interviews. And I'm typically the one directing the host to ask what questions and like how to engage and all of that. And so that's where my skill set came from sales, you know, all these years. And so I ended up that day in front of the camera, and I conducted the interviews with these people. And then I realized how much easier it was, because I'm asking the questions I need them to ask, and it's less editing and cutting, and there it went. And next thing you know, I'm considered, you know, I'm the wine lady on the TV channel, and it just went from there. So then I realized quickly that what I'm selling, because I was selling advertising on that particular channel, my shows and my interviewing these people, that it was effective and it worked, because I'm out and about, like, and now everybody's like recognizing me and they know who I am. And so that was it was amazing. I mean, it was super cool. And it grew from there. And that channel, I produced content for that channel for almost 10 years. And then, of course, social media came along, and then the game changed. And I just love what I do, and I just do it. Like, I have the means to do it, produce. I mean, you know, we have all the equipment. We've got everything, you know, the deal. Like, it's the setup. And I've been fortunate to have a crew with me all the time. And my brother had been a huge partner in the company for some time, and he does all my tech stuff, and he's phenomenal. And I've just been blessed. I don't even know how else to say how I got here, because, you know, if we really want to get into the roots of who I was and what I was like as a child and how I grew up.
Yes, please. Let's get into that.
You would never think that I would end up here. And so when I drive into Pismo Beach every day to my office in downtown Pismo Beach, and I see that, you know, coming down Pomeroy, and I see the flag, and I see the water, and I mean, I have to wake myself up every day to say, be thankful every day. You are blessed, and this is amazing that you made it to where you are, and that you're still alive, because there's a whole story about me almost not being alive just months ago. So,
months ago.
Just months ago, yeah. I have so many stories.
Okay,
I mean, so many stories.
I'd love to hear them.
But so I did, because that story could take a long time. So I did a whole like documentary videos, 3, as a matter of fact, chapters on what happened to me medically the end of 2021, and that it's a miracle that I'm sitting here today, because it is a miracle. And through that, I found God. And it's sad to say that it took something like that, and me being like 50 years old, to find God and to know that he saved my life, but I know he truly did, and made me a better person for it. And so that video is out on my channels, and it was very tough to do, and I like pretty much cried through the majority of it. But to go back to like how I started and how the pride I feel today for what I've been able to, I guess, overcome. You know, as a child, I grew up with, well, I have 7 siblings. You know, we were born and raised out of Pasco, Washington. I don't know if many of you even know where that is, but the Tri-Cities. And it's Pasco, Richland, Kennewick, and I was born in Pasco. And my parents, you know, were very young. I mean, my mom and dad probably eloped out of Bakersfield. They met working in the fields. Hispanic, you know, Mexican background. And so that's where my father's family was from, and still is, in Washington State. And so we grew up in, you know, it's hard to say, a very dysfunctional, you know, I mean, we're all dysfunctional in some way, shape, or form, I think, our families. But it's all we knew. You know, we, of course, lived off welfare. You know, mom worked, my oldest sister worked to support the family. Like, my dad was an alcoholic, and who, God knows what else he was doing out there. You know, he was that guy. He was a mega partier, but well respected, like always well respected. Nobody messed with my dad. My dad was like the baddest ass you would ever meet, and you would never cross him. And he was, you know, people were fearful of him, including us, you know. So I grew up in an abusive environment. You know, he beat my mom on a pretty regular basis, and wouldn't hesitate to beat the hell out of any of us if we needed it. And he was adamant about like my brothers growing up in boxing, because, you know, I think a lot of our parents lived through us. And so my brothers, my oldest brothers, Randy and Jody, were trained to box. And then my younger brother, Adrian, at the time. And so us girls were their sparring partners. And as much as I didn't want to box and have to be a sparring partner, like, I had no choice, because if I didn't, then I'd probably get the shit beat out of me. And that's just kind of how it went. And it was normal. Like, that's all you know, and going to, you know, family functions. And my dad had a huge family. He has 13 siblings. Mm. And that was the lifestyle you lived in. Like, they'd party, and they'd just be drinking all day long. And like, the kids are running around doing whatever they want. And that's just kind of how we grew up. And my grandfather, his father, I remember us kids, all the grandkids, were very fearful of him, you know, and he was a big man, you know, and when you're little, like, they're even that much bigger. But my grandfather always respected us kids different, I felt, than my other cousins. There was a different dynamic there. And we would, you know, be taken out of school. I remember, like, when I was in junior high, we were taken out of school to go work in the fields, you know, and this is a story that a lot of people that follow me haven't heard yet. They've heard a lot about me, and they've heard the worst, you know, especially with this recent health journey that I went on. But as far as my background and my roots, they really haven't heard this. But it's this that I believe truly built me up into who I am today. So that fight my dad instilled in us, whether you want to call it abuse, physical abuse or not, because we used to get the shit beat out of us, you know. And my brothers got it way, way worse. Like, my brother Randy, He's the oldest, and he went through a journey and found God and was reborn. I mean, he struggled for a long time, and still today with what happened to him and what my dad did to him. And you grow up with so much anger, and I can relate. I had a lot of anger, and I could lose my temper in a heartbeat. And my brother, as much as he didn't want to be like my dad, he grew up like my dad. He used to abuse his wives. The women he was with, he used to cheat on them. My dad was known to cheat. He was very handsome man. And you just grow up with that, and you so don't want to be that person, but there's a part of you that becomes that. And so even for me, there's two other girls, and I was most like my father. As much as I thought I hated my father, like, I was most like my father, and my oldest brother was most like my father. So the two of us, and so you grow up with this temper and this heat and this anger, and you're just always like angry at the world. And then you look back and you're like, my dad was angry at the world. He was always looking for a fight. He was always looking for somebody just to look at him the wrong way, and he would kick their ass. It was crazy. So between that, growing up in that, working in the fields at a very young age, I used to be one of the little ones, one of the three little ones, and we used to be able to sit in the back of the truck while my older siblings had to go out and work in the field. And then one day I'm like, I want to try it. I thought it looked fun. Well, that was the dumbest thing I could have ever done, because he put me to work, and I remember like crying, working in the fields, crying because I didn't want to be doing it. And my mom would like fill my pocket with, M&Ms, and, I would just have to work and contribute to the family. And that's what we did. And that's what we learned. And when you grow up like that, it like when you have a job, like an actual job, and you're not having to work in the fields, like you're going to bust your ass and you're going to do the best you can. And you're going to and I'm still to some degree a workaholic. Like you become so, like I would be that person that just work overtime. And people are like, you're crazy. Like you put in all these extra hours. I'm like, I was just programmed that way after that, just to always do that, to give 110%, like always, always, always. And that doesn't exist so much anymore in the world, it seems, that's for sure. But so I guess my point is, regardless, and there was a lot of other things that happened along the way, a lot of other things I had to overcome with my daughter and relationships. And you just, again, you have this fight. I have this, and I'm a Leo, so I have that lion in me, and you just constantly are overcoming and overcoming and overcoming. You're like, what's next? Like, what's next, God? What are you going to put in front of me now? Because I've overcome this and I've overcome this, and you just keep trying to, like, I don't know who you're trying to prove it to, maybe yourself, but I continued to do that in life. And then in that, you just become so much more confident in who you are and how you approach things. And next thing you know, and you're a natural leader in life. And I became that leader, and I became within our family, that person that's keeping it together, keeping us all together, going in the same direction. And almost you become a boss on so many levels, and you don't know how to be a boss. Like, I became a boss in the relationship. I became a boss in my family. I became a boss like in everything that I do with work. And that can also be harmful, because you're just always kind of like that intense person, and that's kind of bit me in the ass here and there. But no matter what you go through, it doesn't have to dictate your success down the road, because I know a lot of other, girlfriends that, were molested by their fathers, and awful things that happened. We were physically abused. Thank God that didn't ever happen to me. But I know a lot of females that did happen to them, and you would have never know it in some cases, but then in others you would, because they're so broken still. And then they have bad relationships because of what happened to them as children. And, it's sad. And you wish that you could give your strength to these people sometimes and just say, you can overcome this. You can do it. I know you can do it. I see people do it. I've done it. But some people don't have that mechanism within them. And then they've got to find something else that's going to help them get better or get to that next level. And it could be, turning to Jesus. It could be meditation. I mean, there's a lot of different things out there where people can hold on to and help that healing process. But I think a lot of it is just recognizing where it comes from and being able to talk about it. Like our family would not talk about it for the longest time, because it was very painful and it was a dark place. And I would say we just openly started talking about this after I got sick and came out of the hospital and out of rehabilitation, because I almost died. And I think when somebody in your family like me almost dies and they almost have that loss, that then you just kind of like revisit all of those feelings. And if, oh my God, if that person would have gone, like, we haven't even talked about it as a family because we didn't want to face it, when we're like all the ones that went through it together, but we don't even want to talk about it. And it's a hard conversation because some of us are still angry with Dad, and I respect that. Like, I forgave my father a long time ago. And I believe I'm who I am today because of my dad. And there have been some not good things because I did have that anger and I had bad temper. I grew up a fighter. We all grew up fighters. I was a bully at one point in my life that nobody knows. And I'm not proud of that. But you just have this fight in you and you're always fighting. And even as I've taken that into my career, I'm that person like, challenge me, and see, let's see what happens here. I'm always ready for that. And not so much anymore, because I've learned to kind of like, after I got out of the hospital, I learned a lot through that too. And so I don't think I'm that super intense person that I was, I guess. But it took me almost dying recently to realize a lot of these things, and that I didn't have to be this super strong, like, fight person all the time and like in charge and leading and like all these things. I just needed to like relax, Valerie. Like, relax, enjoy what's around you, like look around, just be thankful. I'm so thankful I can just breathe now and take a deep breath, because that's what almost killed me. It's like, so you just go through all these things, and then you just, when you come out of it, the reality of it is, a lot of us have really bad things that have happened in life, but you make them what you want them to be, and you can change that. And God has a plan for you regardless. Like, this has been God's plan all along. I just didn't have my eyes open, and believe me, they're wide open now.
So I had a question. I want to know how the trauma from your past affected your relationships. And I mean by relationships, I mean not relationships with friends, but relationships with men.
Well, it definitely affected relationships. And early on, I would say I wasn't afraid of men. I was like, I was the person that was going to hit you first, because you're not going to hit me first. I was on my toes always. And I was going to cheat on you first. I was going to do all the things that I knew you were going to do to me first. That was me. Because I saw that growing up. I saw my father doing it. I saw my brothers doing it. Like, this is how men are, is kind of how I went into it. And obviously those views have completely changed, but it took a long time. And so, and I was very jealous, a very jealous personality. I mean, Hispanic women, I think in general are, in most cases, but I just saw what happened. And then I saw my mom constantly being, put down and like, this is your place as a woman. Like she was a kept woman. And I was not going to be anything like that. But then I became so much like him. And a woman, and my aunts were super badass too. Like his sisters were badass. Like they wouldn't let men touch them. They were fighters too. And so it was interesting. And I became that person where if you mess with me, and especially if you cheated on me, I'm going to come after you. And it's not going to be good for you. And I did. And I got myself into trouble. And then my brothers were boxers. Like, if you hit me, there might be other issues that are going to come your way. I was that person. And that happened too, where he would hit me back because if I'm going to hit you, watch out because they might actually hit you back. And when you've got a guy and a girl like boxing, that's a problem. Because he's probably going to hit harder.
I can't imagine I guess I can, but I don't know. And I also don't know many men. I don't know any men actually that would hit a woman.
Well, this person in particular was the only one that hit me. And it was the first, what I thought was a serious relationship, which was a joke in hindsight. And he did hit me back. Well, then it got to a point where he got comfortable hitting me because I'm the one that started it. I will admit that. I'm the one that hit first. But then, like I said, he got comfortable hitting me back. And then that became a bigger issue. And then my family got involved. He ended up going to jail on Father's Day, as a matter of fact, one day when he punched me in the face. And I was like over it. But it was just a bad relationship. It was all bad. It was my first so-called relationship. I was like 18, I think, or something like that. And I was on my own, by the way, at 16 and a half, 17, I want to say. My parents moved back to Washington and left me.
Really?
Yeah. And then I graduated from high school, barely. And I didn't have any of my family there. And those were the things that were like so profound. And it's like, it hurt so bad, to not have your family there, like when you're graduating from high school. And so I pat myself on the back because I still graduated. I easily could have not, but I was already working Homes and Land magazine. Like I was already in that workaholic work mode. So I'm like, who needs to graduate? Like I can just work my butt off and like make killer money and I'm all right. But you just become resilient and you're just like, you've got to take care of you. And so then I ended up pregnant, I ended up pregnant at 18, had her at 19. And that was a whole, it's like, do I have her? I didn't know what to do.
Was this with the serious relationship guy?
Yes. Who ends up not being her father, by the way. So that's a whole other story. But, and, when we say serious relationship guy, like this, when I got pregnant, he had someone else pregnant at the same time. Like the whole thing was all bad, like I said, from the very beginning. And he was much older than me. He was probably like 3 or 4 years older than me, and I was 18. Um, but I didn't have my parents around at all either. And so I think you're just kind of like lost and trying to figure out you when you're 18 and your parents are gone, and like, it was all bad. And my dad left because I started standing up to him for abusing my mom. My brothers were out of the house by this time because he beat the hell out of them every time they tried to stand up for my mom. And now I'm 18, so it's like, although he could easily hit me, but again, I wasn't afraid. You're not afraid anymore. Like I wasn't, my brothers and I would go at it, and I'd stand there and say, hit me, go ahead, hit me. Like, nobody can do what my dad hasn't already done. So if I could take it from him, I could pretty much take it from anybody. That was my attitude. And so after that relationship, I went and had my daughter in Washington. I did finally go back to Washington to have her because I was deathly afraid of like my anger and what am I going to do to this poor child? Like, I was like afraid of my own temper, and I don't want to say I was never like a huge fan of kids, but I was 18. Like, I didn't know what to do with a kid. And I almost didn't have her, but, I did. And I talked to, my aunt was like instrumental in that. And like, kids never come at the right time, but, all my kids were a blessing and they're great. And like, so I did. And my father didn't know I was pregnant. And then, when he found out, he got in a really bad accident, drinking and driving, and he almost died, when he found out that I was pregnant. So it was just one mess after another. But my dad became sober because of that for, I would say, about a year. So when I went over there, my dad was sober, and that was the first time I'd ever seen my dad sober. And that was great. Like, my dad was super loving, I don't want people to get it twisted and not think my dad didn't have love for us, because my dad was very loving. He was the best when he wasn't drunk or on something, he was very loving. And so I got to see him at least for that period of time sober. He was working, I was helping him with his work, and so that was good, but that didn't last very long. I ended up coming back here to California and bringing my daughter, and he was devastated, I think, that I was taking her. My dad would get very attached to babies. He loved babies. And but I had to come back, and then he started drinking again, and, that drama continued over in Washington with him and my mom and his family there. Eventually my mom ended up coming here back to California. And then it was just always, to watch an abusive relationship just go on and on and on and on. And like, I mean, we went to shelters. We left my dad so many times, but we always went back. My mom always went back. And even here when I'm in I've got Ariana, and I'm like 19, 20, we're still going through that here because now they're back here again. And it's tough because now I've got two little brothers, that are in the picture. And so now my protection is now not just my mom, now it's also my little brothers. And I know I'm getting away from the whole relationship thing, but it was hard to have any relationship when this is still all happening with my parents. And so I was the one involved in all of that all the time. I don't know why I was like the main one, but I was always looking out for my mom. And today, like everybody that follows me and knows me, my mom and I are like this forever. And she's right here in AG and always make sure she's taken care of. She's my everything. And even then, having a relationship, I always need to make sure mom was okay. And so on this particular time, my mom was abused again, and my dad showed up looking for my mom. I was at my boyfriend's house, this jerk off that I was with, and I remember seeing my little brother, Simon, who works with me in the business, and I don't even know that he knows this, but so my dad and my little brother show up at the door. My little brother's got to be like, Simon's probably like 3 or 4. And they're like, have you seen your mom? And I'm like, it's like morning. And I'm like, no. And I already knew something bad had happened, you know. And so, yeah, she took off running down the street and left him again, you know, went to a shelter again. And now we're in a Atascadero, and it's like, when is this going to stop? Like, Jesus, like we've been going through this shit for like my whole life. And so once again, Valerie, you know, Valerie to the rescue. You don't have to ask me. I'm just going to do it. My mom didn't have a car. My little brother was there with my dad. So I think she had taken my other little brother. So I set out to get my little brother back and to get my mom the van that my dad had. And so, you know, I just kind of like timed it, waited for dad to get either drunk enough or do whatever he's going to do. And just, so I did sneak the keys to the van, and I ended up getting my mom the van. And then I showed up with the police because I was living there. I showed up with the police at the apartment and took all of the belongings that I needed. And so I would do crazy things like that and not be afraid of my dad. And to some degree, of course, I was very afraid of my dad. But we ended up getting my little brother back too, to my mom. And then I tried to leave that area. I came to Rio Grande to get away from that really bad relationship. But that followed me, you know what I mean? It followed me. And then one night he tried choking me. And I believe that was almost the final end of that. Then I even moved even further. I moved to Lompoc. And because I was working this whole time. I'm always working. Like, that's a huge priority for me, to take care of me and my daughter. And he ended up coming there even. But by now I'm like really breaking that barrier, and I'm meeting new people and like, but then my daughter ends up unfortunately having to deal with now a mom that, like, my mission and goal in life is to be very successful. And unfortunately it was at the cost of, like, you know, her being in childcare and friends watching her, because I was traveling. I was like going everywhere. I was a salesperson and for a company out of Buellton, and my career was everything to me. And you want to become somebody so bad because you were nobody as a child, and you were that little field worker and that abused child, and you saw these awful things, and so you want to so badly become somebody and not necessarily ever forget about that, because I tell myself, and I have a tattoo that to tell myself I won't ever forget about that life, because that's who made me. But my daughter did suffer and didn't get the attention and the love that I should have given her, and I have huge regrets for that. Huge regrets. But I can't change what's done. And then my relationships after that, I had a couple. I had one really bad one, another one. I was with him for 10 years. And that's for another podcast. We'll just say that. But I always say I was sleeping with the devil, and I didn't know. I was sleeping with the devil. And we took in his 2 kids at one point even, and because they were taken away from their mom, and so raised them even with my daughter. And then something even more traumatic happened, and that all broke up, and he ended up going to prison for 8 years. And that's why I said that's for another podcast. But then I get past that, you know. And the guy I'm with now, we'll just fast forward to Tim, because there were a couple little things here and there, but never anything big. I was always, you know, that attracted to the bad boys, of course, and the guys with the big muscles and like, all of that. And that just never panned out. And they were usually Hispanic men because that's what I was all about and attracted to. And they're super macho, and you guys aren't hearing anything you don't already know. They're super macho. They're also jealous. And so when you have two of those personalities, like it's not going to work out. So then I meet Tim, and Tim is who I'm with now and been with for 7 years. It'll be 7 years this month. Crazy. And he's a white guy. And so that all in itself was like a huge deal. And he's a cowboy kind of, and he loves rock and like all these opposite things of my whole world. And it was a big deal, when I met Tim and brought him into the family and Tim, he wasn't super family oriented, I will say. And my family, like we're like our, Hispanic families, we're like together all the time, like doing stuff. And so we brought him into our world and he's been great. And he knows of everything that's happened in my past. But this is a guy that like, he could care, I don't want to say care less what I'm doing, but like care less what I'm doing. Like he trusts me, I trust him. And it took a while for me to know that I could trust him. But I can totally trust him, and everybody in town knows both of us. So it's like, I have total trust, and the way he loves me, like I know he loves me more than any other man has in the world. Like you just know it. And he drives me crazy. I drive him crazy, but I can't imagine life without him. And I think he would say the same. And we're not married. And I have a weird take on the whole marriage thing too. And so life is good, he helped me through my rehabilitation. So he's seen me at my absolute worst. He saw me through almost death. And when you've got somebody like that by your side the whole time, that's your person. And that is. And it may have even taken that for me to realize that he's that person for me, because I always have those doubts, So I guess that's kind of it in a nutshell, without going into a couple other things that could probably take another 5 hours.
So when did you realize I can't be this way anymore? It's not working in terms of the way that I view your fighting, I guess,
mentality.
Exactly. When did you realize I gotta transfer out of this?
So as I started growing in my career, clearly you have to carry a level of professionalism. And so that's, I think, what really brought it to my attention. And even though I would get angry in situations, I knew I had to keep it, to a minimum. But even in my professional world, I almost feel like I had like this other personality where this is professional Valerie. And then, on the weekends, I'm with my friends and I'm this whole other person. And usually, drinking and partying and that whole scene. So I've got some friends that'll get a kick out of me talking about this, because I had to remind myself who I am in the professional world, and I can't be this other person, this fighter, this almost like I want to say from the ghetto, I had to really pay attention to that, because that would ruin what I've built. And so that was always a struggle. And there have been several things and incidents that had happened, where I wouldn't think twice to get in a fight. If something happened and it's happened, it's happened plenty of times. And I think part of like when I lived in Lompoc was who's this girl, and who does she think she is? I'm coming into whoever's territory, and I'm just this skinny white girl, they thought. And then they found out otherwise. I wasn't just this skinny little white girl. I will fight for myself and stand up, and I'm not going to allow people to disrespect me. And I think that helped in my career, but it also kept me in check, And then once I became the owner of my own company, once you're like, I became Noble Productions, that just automatically knocks that down. I mean, that fight is probably always going to exist in me, but it's how we utilize that for good now, And so I'm the past president at the Pismo Chamber of Commerce. And so sometimes you have situations where you've got to help fight now on behalf of all these businesses in our community. You've got to help, go toe to toe with city council on certain agenda items, and again, have the back of your business community. So you take that fight and you use it in different avenues now in your career. And you just have to learn to funnel that and channel that right. And I think I've done that. And then after I was in the hospital, when you're in the hospital and you're fighting for your life, like I say, that was my ultimate fight. And that was the fight for my life. And I never thought at almost 50 that I would be fighting for my life, but I did. And I almost gave up. You're so sick that you look back and you're like, I did a lot of things. I did a lot of what I consider to be pretty good things. People know me. And maybe I'm done. Maybe it's my time, because you just want to give up and just give up. And nothing defeated me the way this sickness defeated me, which is an onset of COVID. And I have rheumatoid arthritis, so I was on a heavy dose of autoimmune medication called Rituxan. It completely depleted my immune system, and then I was just attacked in my lungs and just spiraled downhill. And a lot happened to me in that, and I ended up in ICU twice. I went back and forth to the hospital twice, So when you go through something like that, that ultimately opened my eyes up to so much more. And I'd been in such fight mode all my life, and I'd been the one to, oh, you need something, I got you. You need help with this person, okay, we'll take care of that. I was that person. But when I was in there, I needed help. I needed help like something bad. But I was never one to ask for help. I never wanted anybody's help. And so when you can't even get up to go to the toilet and you need someone's help, that was the most humbling experience of my life. And to receive God at the same time, right? You have to be humbled. You have to be in that place. And I was in that place in the hospital. And I finally opened my eyes up to the realization of all the things that I've kind of been doing wrong, and that I needed to receive, and I needed to love. Like, that love element was just it was broken, I was, so that's ultimately what changed me. And I say changed me for the better. Like, had I not gone through that experience, I wouldn't be the best me today. And I feel like today I am the best me, because now I have God on my side. And I didn't necessarily have that before. And so the things that I did before, people are, oh, you were great before. And I may have been great in their eyes, but I'm going to be so much better now. And I'm going to do even more good around here now. And so reinventing myself after I got out, and after I came back, because it's been almost a year. So I started reinventing myself by starting my own podcast and starting my own show called Everything Central Coast. And because I want to cover everything, and I want to tell stories, and I want people to feel like you, right? Like when you can share other people's stories, it helps other people. And then they feel good about like whatever they've gone through in life. And so I want to expand on that, and I want to do more of that. And I have so many stories of my own that have helped me get to this place. And it doesn't mean that everybody has to turn to God. And I'm just saying that's where my heart went, and that's what opened me up. And that's why I believe I am truly here today. I know that. But there's a lot of other resources out there for people to find help. And I feel like a big part of that is just talking to somebody, just having a conversation. And when I came out of the hospital and rehab, I had so many people reaching out to me. It was amazing. Like the flood of love that you get from the community and from your people that you didn't even know was there. Monique was instrumental in that too. She held a fundraiser for me over at Finn's, and I had, the past president of the Pismo Chamber do a fundraiser for me. And I didn't ask for these things, I didn't ask for money. I didn't ask for help. I didn't, but I had to change that thinking, quit telling yourself that, like, just receive, just let them love you, let them help you, but that took a lot. I mean, I would just sit in there in tears over what was happening, but I'm so much better today for it.
So when you went through the turmoil in the hospital or with COVID, you mentioned that you found God there. So I'm assuming that your entire life pre-COVID, God wasn't there, or were you just sort of nihilistic, didn't believe?
I've always believed in God, in some level of God. But I guess like many people, there have been so many bad things that happened in my life, right? That you doubt. And you can't have doubt. You can't doubt him. He's always there. And I just wasn't ready to receive that. And even when my brother Randy became a reborn Christian, and he wasn't preaching to us, but he would tell us, and we would, at Thanksgiving, Randy, pray for us, and I'd call Randy and ask Randy to pray for us for certain things. And we had Randy in our corner, and that was a good feeling to have that. If I had that one person in our family that was our person to do that. But I never fully accepted that. But when I was in the hospital, and Randy came to me, and he was instrumental in helping me open my eyes and said, you know what, you've got a second chance at life, and, maybe you need to reevaluate and change some things. And it took me a minute. It took me getting out of the hospital, going back into the hospital again for the second time to then grasp that. And once I grasped that and I started seeing the blessings around me, of there were certain things happening, then more of them started happening. And then, he brought me some reading material, and then there's miraculous things that happen. And when there are miracles like that, it's only got to come from one place. And I know where that place was. And then it just went from there. He brought me my Bible. I just fully gave myself to God there and said I would be a changed person after this. Just give me another chance.
Did you say it out of a fearful state?
No, I was never fearful. Because I was ready to die at one point. I didn't care anymore. So I don't believe it was fear. I believe it was just receiving something that had always been there. I feel like he's literally always been there, and I just, for whatever reason, just wouldn't allow him in and made excuses for it, like I think a lot of us do. And it doesn't mean you're like, everybody knows me around here. I'm not going around preaching or anything like that. But I am definitely reading on a regular basis and staying in a peaceful place. I'm going to a group now on Tuesday nights. I'm going to church on Sundays whenever I can. And I find myself, because once you receive that, it's amazing, because I'll wake up in the middle of the night and that's who I'm turning to. Like, that's who I'm speaking to now. And that never happened before. I mean, music in my head, songs, it's all worship. And it's just happened. So, once you are willing to truly accept that, that's what comes with it. And it's just, like I said, it's an amazing miracle, and it's happened to me, and I'm not going to take that for granted.
So is it kind of now become more of a, I wouldn't call it a mission, but do you want to now share that sort of experience that you've had with people? Does it cause you to want to share that experience with people?
Absolutely. I did, and because I've always been the person to share my experiences, that I'm always the one telling the story. I'm always the one doing the interview. That's why this was interesting for me, because I've not been interviewed. And so when I was in there going through this, all I could think about was telling this story. God's put me in this place to tell this story. And if my story can help others, then that's great work. And take it for what you want, whether it's me finding God in this, or whether it's the fight that I had in me, and how my brokenness of not knowing how to receive was only overcome when I was in the hospital going through this, that love is now a word I embrace, and I tell my family. We that used to not happen. We wouldn't say I love you. We wouldn't do that. We were too strong, and we were raised like we're too strong to say those kinds of words. They're weakness. Everything was weakness to me. Crying was weakness. And I cried. I cried so much. I would say this past 6 months than I've ever cried in my life, like my whole family. And it shouldn't take something like that, but sometimes it does. But now I'm in touch with that, and it's a good feeling.
Your entire story is real profound. And the fact that you came from this, and you call it the ghetto, but we're going to go above and beyond that. It's a tumultuous upbringing. You came out of that, and even though you found God way later in life, you found God, and you have a different way about you and structure. Your orientation in life is different as a result of that. And that, like I said, is the most profound thing, that you have circumvented yourself and really cultivated yourself into something different, something that's more beneficial and of benevolence to others around you. Because your entire upbringing was kind of like your dad almost treated you like you were one of your brothers, right?
Right.
And that's, not typically the way that a woman is typically treated in a family. But for you to come out of that and you to understand, well, okay, so I'm not supposed to be like this. I'm supposed to feel. I'm supposed to maybe have some weaknesses. It's okay to do that. It's okay to express emotion, etc. It's almost like you found a different, I don't want to call it a chemical, but there's a chemical reaction now that's not so dormant.
Right.
Now it's living, and now it can live through you and really showcase itself to others, and how you interface with others and how you move in life. And so, yeah, you just really circumvented yourself, circumvented your situation to be something that's beneficial to you and to others as a result.
Right.
And that's profound.
Well, thank you.
Is this the first time you shared that?
Yes, this definitely was. And I didn't plan for this. So I thought we were going to talk about Noble Productions and my events and that kind of thing. But, everybody knows about that. but not everybody knows about this.
Well, and that's the most important thing, because we don't want to just be a different iteration of what other people already know. You know, we want to, it's good to dispense with things that are somewhat dormant and or not known by others. Right. It's good. And you don't know how it's going to affect other people, how they're going to receive it, what they may be going through in their time right now. And maybe they're going through something very, very similar. And what you're saying is giving them hope, and it's giving them strength, and it's building up a backbone within them,
right,
so to speak. And that's of the most utility to anybody, I would imagine.
Right.
You know, so thank you for that. Thank you for telling your story. And we're going to talk about Noble Productions. We're going to talk about the Sleeping with the Devil. We're going to do that. That's all on a volume 2.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
But we have to do that because this was an awesome podcast. This was an awesome time with you. I appreciate your time.
Absolutely.
And listen, so for anybody who doesn't follow you yet, there's probably nobody, but for those of you who don't follow Valerie, where can they find you?
So Valerie Mercado, Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, of course, podcasts on Spotify, Amazon Music, Buzzsprout. And so, yeah, I mean, you can Google me, and there'll be a list and a ton of videos and everything there. So
shout out the podcast one more time.
So it's Everything Central Coast on Amazon, Buzzsprout, and Spotify.
Go check it out. People subscribe. Okay. Until next time, Valerie.
Thank you.
Done.
Thank you.